Welcome to the Job Talk Radio Show. Are you wanting more respect, inspiration, and authenticity in your work life? Enjoy a unique blend of interviews and discussions in every show. We may trade our time for money, but that doesn't mean we have to be miserable at work. Gain the tools and knowledge you need to make a meaningful difference in your work life and find your professional fulfillment. Welcome to the Job Talk Radio Show with your host, Dr. Tina.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Job Talk Radio Show. Of course, I am your host, Dr. Tina. Before we begin, I always want to share with you, my audience, who I am and why I do what I do. First and foremost, I am, of course, an executive coach. I am also the creator of the Job Talk Radio Show. I became a coach as I began to become aware of the joy, pain, and turmoil we each experience in our work life, and I studied to understand how to create harmony, peace, and joy in the hours, days, and weeks we all spend on the job. I believe in life we cannot always choose what we do, but we can always choose who we are. And just because we choose to trade our time for money does not mean we should be miserable in our work life. As human beings, we each aspire to a life of autonomy, mastery, and a sense of purpose. To that end, the Job Talk Radio Show is targeted at listeners wanting more encouragement, respect, and inspiration in their work life. Every time you listen to the show, I hope you take away a nugget of wisdom about making your work life more joyous, fulfilling, and profitable. And today it is my great pleasure to have here on the Job Talk Radio Show the very beautiful person of Miss Sharí Alexander. Sharí, welcome to the Job Talk Radio Show.
Thank you so much for having me here. What a beautiful introduction.
Thank you. It is the heart and soul of why I do what I do, and I know there are many, many people like me out there who are committed to making the world better one slice at a time. You, of course, have a tremendous subject matter area that we would like to present to the listening audience today. And you hail from the organization Observe, Connect, Influence. And how specific is that? Today you're going to talk about influential intelligence, II as opposed to EI or IQ. Very clever. Persuasive skills for profit and leadership. Influential intelligence, persuasive skills for profits and leadership. So the most important resource you have, of course, so true, is the ability to be persuasive. Influence leads to sales, it motivates your team, and it helps you to be the leader in your industry that you have always wanted to be. Learn some of the techniques that CIA agents, hostage negotiators, con artists, and the world's best influencers use and how you can use them in an ethical way to build your business and build your community. Sharí, I am so excited to have you on the show. Not only is your topic very important, very powerful, and potentially very profitable, you have a bio that supports your credibility in this field. Sharí is a coach, a speaker, and a writer who has made her career by being known for bringing the dark arts of influence into the light. Oh, very Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
In a way, absolutely. Taking people from Slytherin house over to, I forget the other one.
Whatever the good one is.
Yes. Exactly.
Sharí reveals secrets of enhanced communication techniques known and used by master influencers, including CIA agents, undercover law enforcement, con artists, human intelligence officers, interrogators, trial attorneys, and more. Sharí translates their techniques into practical, strategic, and profitable uses for business leaders. She has designed numerous communication training courses and speeches that cover these enlightening areas of enhanced communication, along with self-study programs. Sharí, you're very accomplished. You are certified in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, for my listening audience who has not heard that term before, neuro-linguistic programming. micro expressions, and body language. Her clients include Fortune 100 companies, CEOs, politicians, and NFL players. Oh, I want to ask who are the politicians, but I won't. An Emmy Award-winning executive, an ESPN announcer, a reality TV star, and New York Times best-selling authors. Sharí is also a regular contributor to entrepreneur.com and guest lecturer at USC. I love bios like this simply because they tell us that this person is credible in her field, and that you're willing to share your time and expertise with us today, Sharí, is a great benefit to my listening audience and also to me. I have the best job in the world. I learn something new every day from somebody who's willing to share. So here you are. You are about influential intelligence, persuasive skills for profits and leadership. The word influence. It gets a bad rap. But what do you think is so important that professionals need to understand about influence?
Sure. So very often people confuse certain terms like influence, persuasion, manipulation, and coercion. And by far one of my most popular blog articles is entitled Separating the Four Horsemen, the difference between persuasion, influence, manipulation, and coercion. And people often get influence mixed up with manipulation, which is using a persuasive skill set for a potentially harmful negative outcome for the person that you're persuading. That's manipulation, that there's a lack of morality, there's a lack of ethical intention behind the techniques. Coercion is on the farthest end of the spectrum, which is where you are potentially putting that person under physical or psychological harm. So clearly torture techniques fall under that. And because influence is a component of those darker sides, people get a little bit squeamish around it. That they think, oh, I don't want to be a bad person, I don't want to know and use these techniques because that may put me in a position of ethical conundrums that I don't know exactly what to do with, so I'm going to stay ignorant. And that is a fatal flaw, because there are people in this world who are actively seeking and understanding and learning and using these techniques for the detriment of other people, such as con artists. And by far my biggest, you shared your why at the top of the show, and so allow me to share mine, that my biggest mission within my company is to tilt the scales in favor of the people who are creating positive change in this world using influential techniques. Because right now, I think that there is something terribly wrong when a con artist knows more about influence and has a language around influence and has a support system around influence, and yet entrepreneurs, business leaders, CEOs, COOs, VPs don't. And yet those are the individuals who are in a position to empower, who are in a position to create movements and change in their communities and the world. And they went to school to learn, spreadsheets and understanding finance and building up their skill set in their industry. However, schools don't teach us communication skills to the depth for us to be highly persuasive. And that is a huge gap that needs to be filled, because at the heart of every success and at the heart of every headache is communication. You cannot achieve your goals unless you are highly persuasive in getting people to see your vision, believe in you, give you money, join your cause, be employed by you. If you aren't persuasive or influential or inspiring, then you won't reach the top of the mountain. And at the same time, if you have a poor communication skill set, the heart of every headache you have is probably due to poor communication, because You are constantly interacting with your fellow human beings. And when there's a conflict between you and an employee, you and your wife, you and your husband, it all has to do with a breakdown in communication or lack of understanding. And so I am wanting to enhance our awareness about our fellow human beings. The beauty of learning about influence is you think you're learning about everybody else, but in the process, you learn a whole hell of a lot about yourself. So it's a joy to do, and I'm rallying the troops to not be squeamish around this word influence and actually own it and own the power and control and insight that it gives them in their professional lives.
That is one of the finest whys I have ever heard. How eloquent you presented your raison d'etre. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as an executive leadership coach myself, I believe leadership is influence. So I'm with you in this is the most influential, significant aspect of what we do is the ability to influence others, to influence the conversation, to be an active participant in this great world of ours. So here you are, you've created this expertise, you've built a niche business for yourself, and you are the advocate for, and I'm going to tilt the scales in favor of positive change in the world. That is just... That flows like silk. So thank you for that. Okay, that said, back to the dark side. Why did why did you turn to spies and such for your interviews and your research up until now?
So, first thing that most people need to know about me is I am an uber geek. I am a nerd. I am a geek. I love superhero stories. I love Marvel and DC Comics. I grew up on Star Trek, so anything kind of sci-fi is my jam. And clearly that's all fiction, but I had always put on a pedestal people who are in the intelligence community, spies, because in my mind, they are, in a way, our modern day superheroes. These are individuals who put themselves in great harm and can achieve great things, and it's all due to how skilled they are in influence and persuasion and their ability to understand people, because for them to attain highly valuable intelligence, they need to attain assets. And assets are people who have information that could potentially benefit our government. But in order for us to get that information, that means that the asset has to ultimately betray their government company or whatever by helping us out. And that's true of all governments, obviously. That's not just within the United States. And that is an amazing skill set to me, because as much as we see the gadgets of James Bond, and I love James Bond, I've always wanted to be James Bond, as much as we think about the gadgets and everything, the true power of a field agent's skill set is the ability to approach a stranger, build strong rapport, build a relationship, and then guide the conversation or relationship towards a specific goal, and then get that person to say something, do something, feel something different by the end of it. So their number one asset is their words and their presence. And I think that's so freaking cool. And so I was at a conference once, and honestly, it's difficult every time I share this story to explain to people, but here's what happened. I'm sitting in a conference, and to be perfectly honest, it wasn't a very good one. The speakers weren't all that great, and it was kind of a bit slapdash. And so I'm just working on my computer, waiting for the conference to wrap up for the day. And a voice outside of myself to my upper right-hand side said, "Wouldn't it be cool if you could interview CIA agents?" And I thought, that would be cool. And then I did nothing with it. I was just like, oh, that's a nice thought. And it probably was highly influenced by the fact that I had watched the movie Spy Game with Brad Pitt and Robert Redford the night before. But there was something to that. And then like 2 years later, that thought came back into my mind. And I was like, that honestly, it fired me up. It got me energized because, again, these are the superheroes in my mind. And I'm thinking, how in the world am I ever going to get access to that kind of an individual? So I'm at a conference I'm at conferences all the time. I'm at another conference 2 years later, and I decided the night before, like, I'm going to pretend like I'm writing a book about influential communications learned from spies. I'm just going to put that out into the universe and see what happens. Well, at that conference, the very first person I shook hands with asked me, because it was a book conference about books. He asked me, well, what book are you writing? And I said, oh, I'm interviewing spies about communication skills. And it's the first person I shook hands with, the first person I had ever uttered those words out loud to. And he said, I did that for 20 years.
Talk about serendipity. Now tell me more.
So before I continue, Dr. Tina, how are we on cursing on our show? Is this allowed? So I shake hands with him, and he says, I've done that for 20 years, and I don't need to be slapped upside the head by the universe too often for me to finally pay attention. And that was the moment. And I was like, okay, this means something. And so from talking with him, and he wasn't with the CIA directly, he worked with the CIA, he was military intelligence. And that's when I learned what the term human intelligence meant in the military world, which I find that beautiful and also a little bit disheartening that there's a thing called human intelligence, and how, for some reason, like, why don't we have classes on that in school? And so connected with him, and then through networking and trust building and rapport building, I then got connected to agents within the agency, and then I thought, well, who else is really good at this? I don't want it just to be a CIA book, because quite frankly, there's only so many people I can get in touch with, because it's spies. And so then that evolved into military intelligence officers. So what that means is that when troops are sent into the villages, for instance, in the Middle East, there's often one military intelligence officer with the unit who it's his or her job to make contact with the most influential person in that village to then build that relationship and hopefully get vital intelligence like, hey, do you know where the enemies are? Hey, do you know where they're storing their weapons? Hey, is there going to be a bomb on the road back home? And clearly you can't just go right out and ask those questions. There's a process in order to build that trust and rapport to get information that you need to save your life and save the life of your unit. And so I learned from those individuals, and every single time I talk to these people, I just feel smaller and smaller because they're just giants. And then I thought, well, okay, these are all the guys doing good stuff. But clearly there is the dark side. Well, let's just figure out who the bad people are and see if that is interesting. And so then I started doing research for con artists, which is fairly easy because you just look at who got arrested.
Oh, they're not listed in the yellow pages?
Right. Actually, some of them are. They're still running their cons. And those were the most difficult interviews, quite frankly, because it's hard not to just look across the table and think, you're scum. But the enlightening side of it is that these individuals, even though they chose a path that wasn't the most ethical, moral path, they did have a skill set. And usually with the con artist, it's a skill set that was developed out of sheer necessity. So these are people who typically grew up in not good homes, abusive homes, crimes out on the streets, and they were the ones who developed a skill set to leverage their communication to stay alive and survive. And that is enlightening and interesting. And then I expanded it to trial attorneys, and I expanded it to hostage negotiators, and even pickup artists, interview pickup artists on their skill set. And when I first set out on this journey, one thing that I thought was going to happen was, oh, okay, I'll learn this tidbit from the intelligence community, and then I'll learn this technique from con artists, and this technique over here and over there. But the aha moment was, holy cow, they all do the same stuff. it's the code has been cracked. They just have different names for the different strategies or different perspective, but it's the same thing without fail. There might be a few nuanced differences. For example, con artists need to run a con, and it's almost easier for them sometimes because there's no ramifications for what they communicate. And by that I mean they have to be out of town by the time they're done. So any lies that they share, they don't really have to keep it in their mind to keep the story straight for very long, versus an intelligence agent does. When they have their legend that they're working with, then they have to make sure that they compartmentalize and remember what they told this person and the disinformation that they've given and things along those lines. With us in the business community, there are techniques that can work in the covert side of influence, but not so much in the business world, because our face will be seen again. We're not going out of town. We're not running any scams. And so we actually are slightly, in a way, more limited in some of the ways that we can deploy these techniques because, we have to stick around. So, but that's still not a good enough reason to not learn these and use these and tap into a power that will serve you forever.
So let's bring it back then to the greater good, the positive change in the world. Mm-hmm. What are some areas in which professionals, leaders, executives, managers, mid-level managers, new entrants into the workforce, what are some ways that they can be more influential in their own sphere?
Well, I'd say that the list of how they couldn't would be shorter. Are you asking specific techniques or the areas in which they can be more influential?
Are there areas in where that they can be more influential? Yes.
Yeah. So I would say, as a somebody who works with people who are kind of at the higher tier of their business, whether it's they started the business, they're entrepreneurs, or they're leaders at the top, it's the term buy-in, that they need to be more skilled at getting people to buy into their vision for what they are creating within the company, buy-in for what they want their customer experience to be like, buy-in for launching a new product. That if you are not able to clearly communicate this thing or experience that you're wanting to manifest, then your fellow human beings won't know the path that they're supposed to be going down, or they won't be inspired to take action. And then that's where you run into the term demotivated, that your workforce just is going through the motions without any fire in their belly. So that's definitely one area. You mentioned people coming into the workforce. I totally get what that's like, because I started my first company when I was 22 years old. And previous to that, I was an actress, which basically means I had no work experience. And so with the skill set of my words and my presence, I was able to convince executives to give me large fees for this skill that I had of turning an idea into a powerful presentation. And so where people coming into the workforce can be more influential is selling who they are, communicating that worth, that value, and that can come in a lot of different forms. It can be that you're a hard worker, you have experience, or you're curious and want to learn. There's tons of different ways that you can frame that based off of what you have observed from the person that you're talking to, what is going to be most interesting to them, of the things that they want to be sure that they communicate to make them hireable, and that's great. And the best influencers, and this is why my company is called Observe, Connect, Influence, is that you come in with your influential intention, but based off of your observations of the other person, then you know how to connect your influential intention to what you have observed to be the hot buttons for that other person. So if you don't know what to look for, then you miss out on making that connection. in the last workshop that I did, I pointed, and what we do is we videotape it and then play the videotape back, that what you think is some great benefit to your product, your prospect is actually more intrigued by something else. And you have the core message that you're trying to communicate, but the ability and the flexibility to adjust the nuances of your message to the person that you're talking to is where the real magic happens. But you need to have the full arsenal of all these different influential techniques to pull from, because what works with one person doesn't necessarily work with another, and you have to pay attention to what works and what doesn't.
However,
sure. So my website is observeconnectinfluence.com, and there you'll find my blog, and you'll find a form on the homepage that if you'd like to hire me as a speaker in your organization, to fill that out, and we get right back to you about calendar dates.
Hanging on the edge of my seat listening to Sharí, because she's talking about the thing that leaders need to know the most about: influence and the art of influence. The story of you becoming an expert in understanding and articulating what influence is, Sharí, is amazing, both from the positive side of being able to connect with intelligence agents and law enforcement officers, and also on the less positive side, but obviously equally interesting, the con artists and the scoundrels out there who clearly know how to use influence to their advantage. So here's what I'm thinking. You've described how people, in what areas they can be more influential. What is the secret? What is the nugget? What is the basic influential process? Are there 3 steps and you're good? How does this play out?
Yeah, well, ultimately there are 3 steps, and underneath each of those are the bricks that lay that foundation. But the foundation is, and it's the name of my company, Observe, Connect, Influence. Where most people go wrong is that when they want to be influential, they jump right into, I need to be influential, so I'm implementing all these influential techniques. And that is the same as if you're standing in front of a stairwell and you want to make it to the 5th step on the stairs. There's 2 ways you can go about it. The first one is you can try to do a vertical jump and land on that 5th step. I mean, you could do it. There's the chance that you will land there and you'll be fine, and that's great. But you also increase your risk of falling flat on your face. So when you jump up to influence, you could be successful. I'm not going to say that you're not going to be, but you increase your risk of falling on your face. The other way to make it to that 5th step is to take it 1 step at a time. And by far the first step is observing the other person. How that translates to is what I call bringing up your antenna. And you can't see me, but I always do these like little ant antenna little things with my hands, like little horns. And so you have to bring up your awareness. And what that means is paying attention with your eyes and your ears. So getting them to talk. By far the most influential people are the ones that get other people to talk first. And what this is, so in sales, they talk about that as when you get people to talk, then you're building rapport with them, and you should listen more than you talk. All of this is true. How an influencer views this part of the process is it is intelligence gathering. So when you get somebody else to talk, a spy might be looking for specific intel on, if it's a corporate spy, then they're looking for intelligence on the new release of a new product or something. And that leans into the world of elicitation, which I love teaching. It's by far one of my favoriteest things in the world.
Say that again. Say it again.
Elicitation.
Okay.
Yes. So elicitation is the skill set of having a conversation with somebody with the intention of gathering specific pieces of intelligence without the other person realizing that they are being pumped for information, basically. And so spies are looking for specific data, let's say. How we as the normal business professionals can use this is during that observe phase, you can use these same elicitation skills to gather the influential intelligence, which boils down to, and the person that you're trying to influence, I refer to as your mark. This is your mark of focus. This is the mark that you're paying attention to. So when you're in that observe phase, the type of influential intelligence you're trying to get from your mark is, what are their values? What are their beliefs? What are their triggers? There are 10 common influential triggers. What are the what's the illustrative language that they use? How do they perceive their world? What are their truths? And influencers are able to gather up these different columns of influential intelligence to get a influential understanding of this person's perspective on reality, because reality is perception. So we need to step into their reality by understanding their perception, and we do that by paying attention to nuanced language. Then, once you have observed this, gathered that intelligence, you connect, second step, you connect the dots of what you have observed to your influential intention. So you change your language to fit that reality, to hook into their truths, to hook into their beliefs, values. And then the connect portion is also about building rapport, because if they don't like you, then you can't influence them. And by far the most influential people, and this is where the con artists just really have a one-up on everybody else, is that they are so influential because they consciously make the other person feel really special. They make their mark feel like they are the only person in the world. And that's why so many of those cons where they get into a relationship with somebody and then walk away with 50 grand is just so disheartening. But you cannot deny that that is a skill set to make it a point to build rapport with somebody. And in business, because it's such a fast-paced world, and we're wanting to accomplish this and that, and then we have our own nervousness, and walking in from one difficult meeting into the next, and trying not to bring that energy into the next meeting, all of this stuff. We forget to just simply take a moment, breathe, be present, and make the other person feel like the most important person in the room. Because our ego, our natural inclination is for us, me, myself, and I, to feel like the most important person in the room. And as the higher up you go on the ladder, the easier it is to fall under that. Well, I'll give you one that I haven't personally interviewed him, but somebody who has worked with him shared this. And Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is known as one of our most persuasive presidents, and he has the strong reputation of making you feel like the most important person in the room. And so when I talked with somebody who had worked with him, they shared his little mini process of how he makes that happen. And it basically boils down to charisma. And in no particular order, because I can't remember the exact ones, but it is listen more than you talk. And I think he even said it's something like a 7-to-1 ratio, getting the other person to talk. And we've heard this before, but it's so important to remember that when we get the opportunity to talk about ourselves, we feel special and we feel heard and listened to. And that's one of the influential triggers that I mentioned. There's 10. One of them is the desire to feel significant and the desire to feel appreciated. And so when you allow somebody else to speak longer than you are tapping into that desire for recognition. And then the other one is that Bill Clinton does not look over the other person's shoulder. And that one was huge for me when I heard it, because I'm like, yes, I live in the city of angels, Los Angeles, and that is the biggest sin in this city, is when you shake hands with somebody, they are saying hello and looking over your shoulder to see if somebody more interesting or more important is there. And I'm sure Los Angeles isn't the city where this happens, but dear goodness, I see it everywhere. So making it a point to not look over the other person's shoulder. And then, of course, eye contact was in there, and I feel like there was another one, and I'm forgetting it at the moment. It will come back to me. But yeah, so making them feel appreciated and significant, and then those simple validating words back, as if they when you repeat back what they say without sounding like a recorder, it makes them know that you have paid attention. And appreciation, just straight up appreciation. That was the other one from Bill Clinton, is that he gives genuine appreciation to the other person. And where this translates into the business world is that there are people that we all work with in the office or whatever that we just don't necessarily get along with. There's friction in that relationship for whatever reason. It's usually a conflict of values of some sort. And so we are Pavlov's dogs. When we see a pattern, then we naturally react to what we know that this pattern is going to reveal. So specifically in relationships, if I know that I feel bad around Bob, then when I see Bob walking down the hallway, I'm already starting to feel bad. So if Bob wants to change that relationship, then the quickest and easiest way is to give appreciation, genuine appreciation. Now,
Sharí, I appreciate, beyond the Clintons of the world and the great influencers and the great scoundrels, was there one surprising lesson from your interviews that stood out among all other things that you've learned?
Yes. So growing up, the best communicator example in my life was my father. Everybody knew who he was. We grew up in Oklahoma City, so it wasn't a small town or anything. But it seemed like everywhere we went, everybody knew who my dad was. And he was just really great at talking with people. And he basically deployed the technique of making other people do more talking than him. And he always talked about the importance of asking good questions. And so many books talk about the importance of asking good questions. Tony Robbins, the quality of your results are determined by the quality of your questions, or the quality of your answers are determined by the quality of your questions. All of this is really good stuff. However, the surprising lesson from my journey in this influential communications world was that speaking in statements is actually more beneficial in certain situations. And this is where we tap into the world of elicitation. And again, elicitation is when you're having a conversation with somebody with the intention of gathering intelligence of some sort. And what I learned, and this came originally for me from the CIA, but FBI uses this, corporate spies use this, military intelligence officers use this, and plenty of things are written up about it. But what I learned was that when we ask questions, instinctually and immediately, we as human beings put up a bit of a force field, because that question needs to make it through a series of filters before we give them the answer. And that series of filters looks like, why do they want to know that? Will I be embarrassed if I tell them the truth? How could they use this against me? Do I feel comfortable sharing that? And those types of filters are what that question has to go through before we respond. And very often that response is edited because we are so skilled at putting those questions through those filters. However, with elicitation, there are certain techniques that you can use to bypass that force field, and one is speaking in statements. One of the best techniques, one of the best statement-esque strategies you can use is understanding that, and this is a quote from one of the Sherlock Holmes renditions, I guess you could say, on television, was people do not like to tell you things, but they love to disagree with you, and they love to prove themselves right.
So true. Absolutely. And I'm agreeing with you.
So what this looks like in a normal conversation is you can use you have to be, so there's ego suspension, which is one of the best spiritual and influential lessons I've learned from this process, is you have to be willing to suspend your ego momentarily in order to attain this objective. So you have to be comfortable putting yourself in a position of looking like you don't know as much as you do, so playing the naivete card, or putting yourself in a position where you will appear to be wrong for a moment. And so when you say some sort of presumptive statement that you know is wrong, it still will yield the result of them to prove you wrong, to prove themselves right, or to sway you to their opinion. And as they do so, they give you all the influential intelligence that you need of how they convince. So the best way to learn how to influence somebody is to watch them try to influence you. And so you gather up, I said, is that you writing notes? I think I heard that.
Yes, it is. Absolutely it is.
See, that's that observational awareness part. You got to train that muscle.
I'm just going to say thank you, short and sweet, Sharí Alexander. Okay, this has been a phenomenal interview. Thank you very much, everybody. Adieu. I shall be back tomorrow.
Thanks for tuning in to the Job Talk Radio Show. If you have a question for Dr. Tina or would like to learn more about her services as a solver of workplace and work-life problems, head over to www.thejobtalkradioshow.com and have a look around. It's time to start shaping your future at work.